Carlo Gambino ensured his son, Tommy, received a top-notch education at Manhattan College, courtesy of the Christian Brothers. Later, Tommy was tasked with overseeing the family's garment industry interest. As Carlo's health began to decline, he made a surprising move, naming his cousin-in-law, Paul Castellano, as his successor, bypassing the expected choice, Neil Delacroce. I had only crossed paths with Carlo once, through an introduction by Toto, who was backing Castellano's bid for power. The encounter was brief, with Carlo extending a courteous greeting, but I sensed he wasn't entirely aware of who I was. Rumors swirled that Carlo's health had been failing for some time, affecting his judgment. He'd allegedly forget debts owed to him, and his once sharp mind had grown cloudy. Perhaps he knew his time was limited, which is why he appointed Castellano as acting boss a year before his passing. With Delacroce behind bars for tax evasion, Carlo's decision wasn't universally accepted. The family was divided, with some loyal to Castellano and others to Delacroce. The power struggle continued until Delacroce's release from prison about a month after Carlo's funeral. Only then was Castellano's position as boss solidified. On a chilly autumn evening, November 24, 1976, the family patriarchs gathered at the residence of Capo Anthony Nino Gaggi, a loyal Castellano ally. The air was thick with tension as Delacroce, a man notorious for his unyielding resolve, sat across from Castellano. Gaggi and myself, taking no chances, had stationed his nephew Dominic, a skilled ex-Green Beret marksman, in the attic, ready to take out anyone who dared to flee the scene. But the evening passed without incident. Toto Arello would later confide in me that Delacroce was a force to be reckoned with, a true original who could have easily defied Castellano's authority. Instead, he chose to play it cool, acknowledging Castellano's wishes and expressing contentment with his current position. The meeting concluded with a nod of agreement. No drama, no fireworks. However, not everyone was pleased with the outcome. John Gotti and his partner in crime, Angelo Ruggiero, were seething. They had been banking on Delacroce's ascension to the top spot, which would have shifted the power dynamic in their favor. But Castellano's grip on the organization remained firm, and his disdain for Gotti and Ruggiero was palpable. In the year preceding Carlo Gambino's passing, the membership books, sealed since 1957, were reopened, sparking a new wave of recruit. The criteria were simple. Your father had to be Italian. Some might view that as a form of racism, but I believe it's a misconception. These men aren't driven by prejudice. They're driven by profit. The only color that matters is green, the color of money. They're equal opportunity exploiters, unencumbered by petty biases. The tradition of keeping it in the family, a relic of their Sicilian heritage, is simply a means to an end. In the old days, you had to have Italian blood running through both your parents' veins to be considered for membership. Later, it was enough to have an Italian father. Your mother's heritage didn't count. The thinking was that you took on your father's identity, his name, and his legacy. Take John Gotti's wife, for instance. She was part Russian Jew, which made their son John Jr., a unique blend of Italian and Russian Jew. Back then, there was a long queue of associates waiting to get made. Each family was allowed to induct 10 new members, and their names would be circulated among the other families for feedback. The following year, families could replace members who had been lost due to various reasons. It was during this time that I got proposed by Toto Arello. What caught his attention was how I handled myself while facing indictment for the Dunn brothers' murders. Arello overheard a Gambino family member mocking me for resorting to robbery to make ends meet during that period, saying it was beneath a family associate to behave like a reckless street kid. Arello swiftly put him in his place, saying, "What's wrong with you?" Sammy acted like a man, took responsibility, and did what needed to be done. I don't want to hear any more of this nonsense. The first I heard about being proposed was from Sale Albanese and the Gambino family. He whispered to me, Sammy, I heard good things about you. I saw your name on the list. Don't mention I told you, but Tato proposed you to get made. The day of reckoning arrives, and Tato summons me to his club, instructing me to dress to impress. Tato whisks us away to a nondescript house in Bensonhurst, the lair of Frankie the Wop. Address escapes me, but the memory of that day remains etched in my mind like a scar. We enter the living room, where a gathering of made men awaits. One by one, they're called to the basement, their footsteps echoing through the silence. My turn finally arrives, and I'm summoned with a nod. Sammy, we need you downstairs. My heart races with anticipation, my senses heightened like a junkie on a fix. I descend the creaky wooden stairs, each step a slow motion countdown to my fate. The air is thick with smoke and expectation. At the bottom, I turn to face the room, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. A long table stretches before me, a who's who of the underworld seated around it. Paul Castellano, the boss, sits at the head, flanked by Neil Delacroce and Joe N. Gallo, the consigliere. Tato's there too, along with captains like Jimmy Brown, their faces a blur of familiarity. An empty chair beckons beside Paul, and I'm ushered towards it. Sit down, Sammy, he says, his voice low and gravelly. Do you know why you're here? I respond with the only answer I've been coached to give. No. Paul's gaze pierces through me, searching for any sign of deception. Then he asks, do you know everyone in this room? I take a deep breath, trying to play it cool. Most of them, I reply, hoping my response will suffice. What do you think of the people around here? Paul asked, his eyes piercing through the dim light. I nodded, a silent affirmation. He leaned in, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. You know this isn't just a social club, right? This is a bond that runs deeper than blood. My heart racing with anticipation. There's only one way to enter this circle, and only one way to leave, he warned, his words dripping with an air of finality. You come in standing tall, and you leave in a box. No exceptions. I swallowed hard, but my resolve didn't waver. I'm all in, I said, my voice firm. Paul's gaze narrowed. Would you sacrifice everything else for this brotherhood? Make it your top priority. I didn't hesitate. Yes. The room seemed to hold its breath as he asked the next question. Would you take a life for us? My answer was immediate. Yes. Paul's eyes locked onto mine. Which finger would you use to pull the trigger? I raised my index finger, a sense of determination coursing through my veins. Tato stood up, his movements fluid and deliberate. Paul, Neil, and Joe Gallo followed suit, their eyes fixed on me. The others remained seated, a silent audience to the ritual unfolding before them. Tato's hand closed around mine, and with a swift motion, he pricked my finger with a pin. A bead of blood welled up, a symbol of my commitment to this secret society. The initiation ritual was etched in my memory like a scar. Paul, my sponsor, handed me a sacred image with my own blood smeared on it. We're going to send this saint up in flames, he declared, striking a match. The flames engulfed the picture, and I felt a searing pain as blisters erupted on my palms. But I was too entranced by the ceremony to flinch. I was so focused on the oath, I forgot to jiggle the picture like the others, and my hands paid the price. As the saint's image crackled and burned, Paul's voice was like a dark incantation. If you betray our secrets, your soul will burn in hell, just like this saint is burning your hands. I repeated the words, my voice barely above a whisper. Paul spoke in hushed Italian, a language I didn't understand, but the gravity of the moment was clear. I crushed the charred remains in my hands, and the ashes fell like a benediction into an ashtray. Next, I was instructed to kiss Paul on both cheeks, a gesture of fealty. I made my way around the table, kissing each of the others before returning to Paul. He bade me sit and the others stood, their hands clasped in a circle. Paul spoke again in Italian, and they released their grip. I was the outsider, unsure of what was happening. But then I was invited to join the circle, and Paul's words bound me to them. In honor of our brotherhood, I tie the knot. Paul's eyes locked onto mine. You're one of us now. You're a friend. He promised that the rules and regulations would be revealed in time. I took my place at the table, still reeling from the ritual. Another initiate was called forward, and that's when I noticed the blisters on my hands, a painful reminder of the oath I had sworn. As the oath-taking ceremony came to a close, Paul gathered us around to explain the unspoken rules of our new fraternity. We were now part of the Gambino family, a tight-knit clan bound by loyalty and tradition. Introductions were made, and we learned our roles. Paul, the patriarch, held the reins as our representatives. Neil, the trusted deputy, served as underboss, and Joe Gallo, the wise counselor, advised as consigliere. The captains, our leaders in the field, were presented to us, and we were schooled in the art of introduction. A subtle distinction was made. A friend of mine was just that, but a friend of ours, introduced by a made member, signaled a deeper connection. This deliberate protocol ensured that our inner circle remained impenetrable. Paul painted a broader picture of our world, revealing the existence of 5 powerful families in New York, each with its own boss. He mentioned the smaller but formidable DeCalvacan family in New Jersey and another in Philadelphia, hinting at a vast network of families beyond the city limit. At the pinnacle of this hierarchy stood the Commission, a governing body composed of bosses from each family, tasked with resolving disputes and shaping policy. Our captain, Paul emphasized, was our direct superior, our father in the organization. We were to report to him, seek his approval, and record all transactions with him. No action, not even the most seemingly insignificant, could be taken without permission from the family. The protocol was clear. We didn't bypass our captain to reach the top. Instead, we worked through the established channels, with our captain serving as our liaison to the administration, the triumvirate of boss, underboss, and consigliere. With a nod, Paul declared our past grievances null and void. As of today, you are reborn, he said. Leave old grudges behind. From this moment forward, we start anew. He declared that allegiance to a higher power was a myth and national loyalty was nothing but a distant dream. Our families, the ones we're supposed to love and cherish, were mere afterthoughts. Our true devotion belonged to this thing of ours, an entity that eclipsed all else. Want to believe in a divine being? Want to pledge allegiance to a flag? Want to prioritize your own flesh and blood? Those were luxuries we couldn't afford. Our organization was the only constant, the sole commitment that mattered. He emphasized that when the boss summoned you, you dropped everything. No exceptions, no excuses. If your child was on their deathbed, you left their side and answered the call. Refuse and you'd be signing your own death warrant. The boss was the ultimate authority, the patriarch of our twisted family, and I, for one, was convinced. The captains took turns drilling us on the rules, the codes of conduct that governed our behavior. We were forbidden from trespassing on each other's relationships, from raising a hand against a brother. The penalties for disobedience were severe, often fatal. I drank the Kool-Aid, hook, line, and sinker. I felt like I'd finally found a community that embodied the values I'd been searching for. But as time went on, I discovered that our sacred oath was nothing more than a farce. We broke every rule, exploited every loophole. When a lawyer later asked me how I could betray our code, I shrugged and said, we'd already broken 99 out of 100 rules. What was one more? But in that dimly lit basement, I was a true believer, convinced that our organization was the only one that truly mattered. I'll never forget the night at the club when Tado summoned Boozy over and dropped the bombshell. Sammy's one of us now. It was a first for me, and the weight of those words sent shivers down my spine. I recalled all the times I'd hung out with Trudeau, watching as old school associates would approach him, eyeing me with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. They'd ask, "Is Sammy part of the crew?" And Tato would calmly reply, "Nah, Sammy's my guy." I finally grasped the significance of his response. It was a subtle distinction, one that had flown over my head until that moment. Boozy was beaming with congratulations, but then some wannabes not yet initiated started filtering in, offering me, well, wishes. I played it cool, pretending not to understand the subtext. It was all part of the charade, the slow unraveling of our secret society. Dotto had warned me about this, how the neighborhood would start to buzz with whispers, and how we'd have to navigate a delicate web of introductions and acknowledgement. Tato schooled me on the importance of tradition. As you attend more gatherings and events, you'll meet more of the family, he said. But remember, you can't just walk up to another maid guy and announce yourself. You need a third party to vouch for you, to say, "This is Sammy, one of us." We can't afford to break that chain of trust. If we do, it's a death sentence.